Soma caught me seriously off guard in more ways than one. I haven't considered myself a fan of modern horror games in a long time. I think the YouTube phenomenon that was Five Nights at Freddy's, Slender, Hello Neighbor, and so on sort of left me with a bad taste in my mouth regarding them. I prefer my horror creeping and psychological, whereas this trend on YouTube brought about a generation of frantic jump scare-ridden horror games, whose most terrifying moments don't stick with you like anything in Soma stuck with me. After playing Soma, I decided to try Amnesia 1 again, and realized that there isn't a single jump scare in either game, yet they're both utterly terrifying. Amnesia's focus is on the gameplay, sneaking around a gothic castle, avoiding monsters, and trying not to go insane at an inconvenient time, with some relatively light psychological elements. Soma, however, is all about the psychological elements, with its story transcending to an existential crisis for both the player and the protagonist, Simon. The centerpiece for the entire game is a survey that you take towards the beginning and at the end regarding the meaning of life when your consciousness and psyche have been uploaded into a machine mind. I'm a big fan of choices in games that don't actually affect anything outside of the player's mind, and this is a great example of why. As a more relatable example, I'll bring up Half-Life 1. Shortly after the disaster starts, you'll see a security guard shooting zombies, and you can either let him do his thing, or kill him with the crowbar so you can get your first gun early. The game doesn't keep track of your interactions with NPCs in any meaningful way, but the context of the story differs greatly depending on your actions. Or, to name a more current example, the choices in Telltale's Walking Dead that don't affect anything. They're still meaningful choices to the story nonetheless. These two surveys in Soma take it to the next level by asking you questions that relate to the themes of the game, and putting the questions the game poses at the center of your mind. Is life any less meaningful in an artificial world or an artificial body? Do you still feel like yourself after a consciousness transfer? Can artificial life make decisions, and for that matter, can organic life make decisions? These are questions that there isn't really a clear scientific answer to yet, so we're forced to take a more spiritual or philosophical approach when asked them. Upon trying to find these surveys online, I found a lot of forum posts where people were noting how much their answers changed between the two surveys, which goes to show the efficacy of the game. Maybe it was because I had already been exposed to plenty of sci-fi about the nature of consciousness, but my answers didn't change all that much. I guess I already had my ideas about the subject decided before I played. But the first survey still did an excellent job at setting the stage. It put my predetermined ideas about life at the center of my mind, and the rest of the game did everything it could to make me question my ideas. I see humans, and all organic life, as incredibly complicated nuts. Apples, for instance, are designed to be carried away from their trees, eaten, and then have their seeds dropped off in a new location, furthering the prominence of the apple tree. While humans are designed to stay alive, migrate to improve their living conditions, and have sex. And like the apple, all of these functions serve to increase our prominence. Following that logic, I assume the humans have no more free will than apples. We're going to do what we were always going to do. I'm of the belief that you didn't choose to watch this video, but you were always going to watch it. All the things you've seen and witnessed in your life led to a mental configuration that would inevitably end up clicking on this video. This may seem sort of tangential and irrelevant to Soma, but free will is, supposedly, the thing that separates us from computers. Seeing as I don't believe in free will, I see life as being equally meaningful regardless of the body your thoughts are coming out of, and regardless of the authenticity of the world we're living in. That's not a negative thing either. I don't think life is meaningless for the people who, like myself, are living it. For most intents and purposes, I and every other human make choices on a daily basis, or at least, we feel enough like we make choices for it to satisfy. What this all boils down to is that, in my mind, a computer with a human's mind in it has just as much meaning in life as a human body with a human mind in it. So, once I had plugged in my answers to the survey, how did Soma test and examine my answers to those questions? There will be spoilers from here on out. I always saw consciousness as a stream. One thought leads to the next and so on. One of the big ideas Soma revolves around is the coin toss. Both in the beginning and in a few other key parts of the game, Simon's consciousness is copy-pasted into another body. Each time this happens, a new fork in the stream of consciousness is revealed. Not created, but revealed. If we happen to be following the route through the stream that eventually wound up in the optimal body, then we're the lucky one. When this coin toss idea is first brought to attention, the first question that came to my mind was, did I win the first coin toss? When Simon had his brain scanned and his memories implanted into an AI hundreds of years later? I'd say yes. The Simon who never left his human body died of brain damage a few months after the scan. while the robotic Simon lived in a hellish nightmare for a few days. However, the robotic Simon had 2 more coin tosses ahead of him. First, the transfer from the dive suit body into the pressure suit body, and secondly, the most important one, the transfer to the Ark, a virtual environment where all is right in the world. The fact that the stream of consciousness we controlled might have been the one that leaves the destroyed Earth and lives in bliss among the stars means, to me, that it's worth sacrificing our organic body that was destined to die early, albeit in a totally calm, normal world. Again, I'd say we won the coin toss, but I definitely wasn't sure, and I'm still not. Would it have been better to live with terrible headaches and the thought that I'm going to die in a few months? Is it worth trading that in for what is essentially a 25% chance at living a great life on a beautiful artificial world, and a 75% chance at being left to rot, scared and alone in a decrepit subaquatic tomb in an undying body? There's no easy answer, period. This is the stuff that makes great horror for me. Like every other human, I think about things a lot, and it's always satisfying when those thoughts lead to a conclusion. So Soma gives us perfectly logical questions like the former, that nonetheless don't have an answer. We can rack our brain looking at the question from spiritual, logical, and philosophical angles, and still not know what we believe in. That's horrifying. Before I move on, I'd like to clarify on a bit of terminology I'll be using from here on out. Simon 1 refers to the organic Simon, Simon 2 refers to the dive suit Simon who is born when we first wake up on Pathos 2, Simon 3 refers to the pressure suit Simon who eventually goes into the abyss, and Simon 4 is the virtual Simon who ends up on the Ark. The coin toss idea leads perfectly naturally into the next problem we're presented with. After our first deliberate consciousness transfer, from the dive suit body into the pressure suit body, we realize that the dive suit body is still alive.
There must be something wrong. Can't you run a diagnosis or something?
And still has Simon 2 in it, and that he's just as real as our current Simon, Simon 3. I have to admit, I did feel slightly cheated here. Sure, transferring us from an organic body to a cybernetic one would definitely be a copy-paste, and the coin toss logic would apply, but I figured transferring myself into a different robotic body would be a simple cut and paste, i.e. there wouldn't be a coin toss, and there would only be one continuity for Simon 2. As it turns out, I was wrong. There were 2 Simons now, and one of them was going to be abandoned by us to feel cheated and confused, rotting all by his lonesome. So that's the situation, but what's the dilemma? Well, should I kill him? Like the last question regarding whether or not we won the first coin toss, there is no clear answer. Only this time, we have to make a choice before we move on. This is the person who, up until now, we've essentially been. We understand his struggle with his new life, his relationships with his old human friends, his relationship with Catherine, your companion throughout the game, and his hopes and dreams, and now we just have to abandon him and pretend he doesn't exist. I ended up choosing to kill him, figuring it's a better fate than going slowly insane like all of the other isolated, human-minded robots we've seen so far. But what about Catherine? She was also isolated, totally alone inside of a robotic body that's completely unable to move, but she didn't want to die, and she didn't go insane. As a result, she was upset that I chose to kill Simon 2. And she knows more about being an AI, being isolated, and the effects it has on you than I possibly could. What if Simon 2 was still human? Would I still want to kill him rather than abandon him? Probably not, and that's what's so troubling about this dilemma. I said earlier that I believe a life is equally valuable and meaningful whether its mind is in a human body or a robotic one, but I still chose to kill Simon 2. Surely all of the deathbed philosophizing and even life-saving problem-solving that a human Simon would have been able to do in that situation could have also been done by Simon 2. If anyone had the right to kill Simon 2, it would have been me, Simon 3. But what if I lost that coin toss? Would I have wanted Simon 3 to kill me? Probably not. So again, I'm left with a question I couldn't possibly answer, only this time I had to live with an answer I'd already decided on, rather than the first question about whether or not I won the first coin toss, which I could ponder on for as long as I wanted, even past the game's ending. Having to act on beliefs that you aren't at all sure about is a beautiful and perfectly natural expansion of the horror brought on by simply not being able to know an answer. What's even better is that eventually we meet the last human on Earth, and she asks us to kill her. Earlier I wondered if I would kill Simon 2 if he was human, and in this moment I get to put that to the test. I did decide to kill her too, only because she asked me, but it wasn't without a good amount of consideration first. Let's jump ahead a bit. There was one section where we had to start up a prototype of the Ark and run a diagnostic on a dummy AI that was loaded into the prototype Ark. The thing is, the prototype Ark could only handle so much memory. So I had to selectively enable and disable things like the moon, a buoy, a park bench, temperature sensation, and so on. I can't be sure how self-aware the dummy AI that would be inhabiting this world was, but I essentially had to play God, deciding what aspects of this virtual world I should include to make his life as comfortable as possible. There's another horrifically uncomfortable moment. Having to make drastic decisions on a computer terminal that would affect something's entire life, and not knowing how much of a life the thing had in the first place. Being forced to make decisions without understanding the consequences. This game does an excellent job of messing with your ability to understand and examining the limits of what you can understand. Another notable section of the game required that I figure out which crew member had an access code I needed and put their brain scan into a simulation so that we could coax it out of him. The simulation had a handful of different environments I could load and personas I could load for Catherine to adopt while speaking to him. Over and over again, the virtual man we brought to life via his brain scan would become disenfranchised and we'd have to shut the simulation down. We probably created and ended a life about 7 times or so before we found the right combination of stimuli to get the code out of him. Here's one way to think about it. Every time I ran the simulation, I was creating a new outcome for this man's coin toss. Assuming I ran the simulation 7 unsuccessful times, 1 successful time, and that the man's mind was uploaded to the Ark. Once I was done, this man's brain scan could have been followed by him waking up, still in his human body, but there was a 7 in 10 chance that he would wake up in one of the simulations where he went insane, a 1 in 10 chance he woke up in the simulation where he helped us and still died shortly after regardless, and just a 1 in 10 chance that he won the coin toss and wound up on the Ark. After doing so, we ended the simulation one last time, and I had the choice to delete his brain scan. Like in the last section, I had to answer a question that I couldn't possibly know the answer to. I chose to delete his mind scan, rationalizing in my head that I have no idea how sentient he may or may not be as he's floating around on that computer with no simulation running. Although, after writing all of this, I realized how pessimistic I was being, opting to kill or delete every sentient life form I had the opportunity to. Scary stuff. Let's jump to the ending. This game has some awesome horror set pieces, such as being captured by the enemy and having to stay near ocean floor lights with an ever-increasing distance between them to avoid an incredibly dangerous fish-like monster, but it eventually leads to the ending. We're sitting in a control booth, preparing to launch the Ark into space to ensure some vestige of humanity lives on. Catherine and Simon 3 are going to upload their consciousnesses to the Ark just as it launches, and the upload takes so long that we're frantically staring at its loading bar as the rocket gets ready to launch. In the heat of the moment, I, and probably Simon, forgot about what was guaranteed to happen. Simon 3 would be stuck on Earth, in Pathos 2, and only Simon 4 would get to exist in the Ark. Only this time, after excitedly shouting as the upload completes, Simon 3 closes his eyes, and when he opens them, we're still Simon 3. We lost the coin toss. The power goes out, I guess as a way to direct more power to the space gun, and we fade out over Simon 3 shouting at Catherine to not leave him, as she's now offline too.
Catherine? Catherine?
After the credits, we wake up in the Ark, showing us Simon 4's perspective. It's beautiful and fake, but that doesn't really matter, at least to me. We walk out of a cave, along a riverside path in the forest, and find a computer terminal where we fill in the second survey. Hopefully you put in answers that are positive about your new life in the Ark, but it's impossible to ignore Simon 3, who is going to go slowly insane while Simon 4 enjoys his life of luxury. When I was about a half hour into Soma, I was thinking, oh, I'm a human in a robot's body and my mind is repressing that, so I still think I'm a human. You're not so clever, game. As it turns out, it would only be about another half hour before that was common knowledge being discussed between Simon and Catherine. Soma was much more clever than I expected. While I consider myself a pretty philosophical person, Soma was able to mess with my head, make me question my philosophy, and doubt my own perspective on the world. That's good horror.